Well, Spurs fans, it must feel like Christmas came early because I don't think even the most optimistic among you would have predicted that you would have gone away to the Etihad against Man City and beaten them 4-0. Man City nil, Spurs 4. What on earth have we just witnessed? And coming into the game, neither side were in great form. Obviously, Spurs had lost the last two games, the last one in the league being the 2-1 home defeat to Ipswich, which was a really bad one and gave Ipswich their first win in the Premier League this season. And Manchester City on the run or they are on at the moment where they've lost 4 games in a row in all competitions. Now with this loss to Spurs, it being 5. I thought both teams, with Man City not being at the best and Spurs having the ability to beat anyone on the day, were pretty level going into this. And I expected goals, which absolutely happened, and I expected an even contest. So that's why I'm surprised and that's why I'm so shocked at this incredible Spurs performance because they went to the Etihad and they dominated Man City. Absolutely dominated from minute 12. For the first 12 minutes, Man City actually, started really well and I was like, "Oh god, Spurs might be in a bit of a tough run for today." When you consider the fact that they have a makeshift backline of Dragusin and Ben Davis against a striker who's arguably the best in the world in Erling Haaland, this is going to be a tough day for Spurs. And then as soon as they kicked off Spurs, they had the kick off in the first half. They immediately lost the ball while trying to build up. They lost to Phil Foden. Yves Bissouma takes out Phil Foden and he gets a yellow card within the first 20 seconds. And you think to yourself, my God, today is going to be a really, really long day. But Spurs grew into it. And not only that, they then went on to get 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. But how did Man City set up initially, and then how did Spurs grow into the game, and then grow into the game from there? How did they again go on to dominate the game? So, Manchester City. Initially, I was a bit surprised because you typically expect Man City to build up with three at the back, but it ended up being two at the back. It ended up being Akanji and Stones, and they reverted to type instead of a 3 and a 2 in build up. They now decided to go for a 2 and a 3, and it was Rico Lewis, Ilkay Gundogan, and Bernardo Silva just in front of them, and if I can give one of them the ball, and with the ball to Akanji, let's say. Walker was tasked to push up, Gavardio was tasked to push up, and then you had Savinho and Phil Foden either side of Erling Haaland, trying to get at those Spurs defenders who aren't the typical first choice with with Romero and Van de Ven out injured. But, and this is the thing, while this worked initially, and they were pressing really high up, Man City actually were, and they were pushing the Spurs midfield back, and it kind of looked like, oh, what, this could be ugly. Spurs could be in for a really difficult day. What then ended up happening, and how Spurs ended up growing into the game, was that they were sensible. They nullified the initial threat of Man City and said, "Do you know what? You're at home. It's back on the national break. You need to respond. Pep Guardiola's got a new contract. Rodri's parading his Ballon d'Or trophy out before the game starts. Go on, have a little start." But then as soon as Man City took their foot off the pedal just a little bit, because they did, then all of a sudden Spurs grew into it. And from here, it was too easy. It was far too easy for Spurs to exploit this Man City side. But how did they do it? Well, first of all, Gavardi was pushing way, way, way up. Kulusevski was helping out a little bit, but was also staying, on the other side of Gavardio. So if there was to be counter attack, he could immediately go on the down the line and counter Man City. You also had Heung-min Son on the wrong side of Kyle Walker, which meant that Kyle Walker was continuously pushing further and further up. And we're going to talk about Kyle Walker later on when it comes to the very last goal and my thoughts on him. But you also had a bit of a lopsided Spurs formation because James Maddison, who had a phenomenal game by the way, kept on getting this side of Rico Lewis. Although on paper they lined up a bit like a 4-2-3-1 with James Maddison the 10, he kept on coming over the left hand side. And while Kulusevski was on the wrong side of Gavardio, he also came over. Sarr came over. Edoji pushed up, leaving Foden, which was very, very risky. And, Ange Postecoglou had massive balls to do this. But he let Man City have the ball one-on-one. Foden against Davies. Haaland in between Davies and Dragusin, with Porro tucking in and didn't really advancing too far forward because he's got such a great ball, so let him utilise his great balls. And Savinho one-on-one again with Porro, and in between Dragusin and Porro, with Gavardo on the outside. It was very, very risky, but it absolutely paid off. And the funny thing is They were trying to overload Walker, Stones, Lewis, which defensively as a three, it hasn't been great, if I'm being honest. Walker is aging a little bit. Rico Lewis defensively, I'm not quite sure about it, if I'm completely honest. I love him as a player. Going forward, he's great. Defensively, I'm not sure. And John Stones, who's just come back from injury and who's not played the whole ton of minutes, and against like the Maddison popping into the spaces, Sar and Basuma overrunning Gundogan, and it was just an absolute genius of a game plan from Ange Postecoglou, because Man City, when they did drop off, they dropped off maybe 1% or 2%, and Spurs absolutely capitalised with some great football. And the first Spurs goal comes from the fact that they're trying to play at the back, they're trying to entice Man City into pressing them. They do entice Man City into pressing them, but the press isn't as effective because, as we all know, they're just not quite the same team at the moment. And the whole attack starts from Dragusin just playing a long ball down the right hand side to Kulusevski. But what I really want to highlight here is two things. First of all, look at the amount of Spurs players who are on Man City's back line, ready to attack and waiting for a ball in attacking position. You've got Kulusevski, you've got Maddison, you've got Solanke, you've got Pedro Porro, you've got Heung-min Son. They're all on the edge of that Man City back line. They're all ready to attack. They're not trying to play the ball through them here. And Man City should be able to snuff that out, and they should have further defenders back ready to help him out. But the fact is, when Kulusevski ends up getting on the end of the ball, you can see as Dragusin plays the pass, Guardiola's favourite here. Guardiola is 100% favourite here. And the fact that he gets it, we'll come on to that in just a moment, but I think is really, really poor on Guardiola's part, who I thought had a really bad game. But not only that, look in the middle, next to the referee, Ilkay Gundogan and James Maddison in the middle of the pitch. There, right there, you can see Gundogan has a perfectly good handle on James Maddison. He ends up scoring the goal. But as we play through the stills, you'll see how easy it was for Maddison to get away with him. But it was also intelligent, very clever movement. And like I said, as this ball bounces for the first time, you can see Guardiola is clear favourite for that. And if he wants to, he could just hook it out and, it's a Spurs throw-in and the danger is immediately nullified. You get your Man City midfielders back and you get into a decent position. He doesn't do that. He lets Kulusevski get the ball. He overruns it and it's just really, really bad defending. But if you look far right in the middle of your screen, that's Gundogan and Maddison again. And still, Gundogan is still, just about, slightly more goal side than Maddison, and he's got ahead of him. And so at the moment, he's got that completely under control. But as it plays on, you'll see how, it's just far too easy for Maddison to get away from him. And as we move it on one more, you can see Kulusevski not only wins the ball from Guardiola, he then able to face up and then put in a wonderful cross into the box. But like I said, James Maddison, now if you look at his distance from Gundogan, he's completely free. Gundogan is in the edge of the D, and James Maddison is making a run into the box completely unmarked. Gundogan is trying to communicate to Stones, go get Maddison, that's your man now. And Stones is like, what? Who's my man? And before you know it, it's a lovely first time finish into the back of the net, and Spurs find themselves 1-0 up. But if you look at the amount of players in the box, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Man City defenders in the box, or Gundogan 4 and Gundogan just on the edge. And then you've got 1, 2, 3, just about 4 Spurs attackers into the box, and Kulusevski putting the cross in. That is way too many Spurs attackers in Man City's box for Man City's liking and Pep Guardiola's liking. And the fact that the Spurs have that willingness to get themselves into the box is a trait that they exhibit throughout the entirety of the game, and it ends up leading to multiple goals. And again, Man City's ineffective press and Spurs capitalising on that this time for their second goal, which was James Maddison again. First now, you've got Akanji on the ball, and he's looking for a man to pass it out to. And Man City are actually in, pretty decent position here. But the one person I want you to focus on here is Dominic Solanke. He, right now, looks like he's completely uninterested in the press. He's the Spurs attacker inside the Man City penalty area. He doesn't look like he's interested at all. He's just letting the game pass him by. But as you see, it's intentional. He's intentionally looking disinterested because he knows exactly when to make the movement. Akanji plays that pass to Guardiola, who's now got to pass it inside because he's got absolutely nowhere else to play it. And now you can see Dominic Solanke just on the edge of the penalty area. He is now sprinting towards Ilkay Gundogan because he realises that, Gundogan is not Rodri. And Man City are going to struggle without Rodri. They need to find another way to play. They need to find another way of building up. They need to find another way of pressing, because at the moment it's simply not working. And Spurs and Ange Postecoglou realise that. And not only did they realise it, that the players with the willingness to work hard and press and have the quality at the end of it to make it worthwhile and finish the chances that they do end up creating. And like I said, this one, Dominic Solanke hasn't, not had the greatest of starts in terms of goals and assists, in terms of attacking output, But what he does off the ball facilitates everyone else, which means that he's able then to be the foil for the other attacking players. And, maybe if Guardiola plays a better pass straight to Gundogan, maybe Man City break out of it. But my bet is that even if Gundogan gets the ball under control, Dominic Solanke is going to win that ball off him, and Spurs are going to get on themselves onto a counter-attack immediately high up in the pitch, and they're going to have a high-face turnover. And as you can see, James Maddison now gets the ball here. 1, 2, 3, 4 Spurs attackers attacking the Man City box with 1, 2, 3, 4 Man City defenders. Again, 4-on-4, 3-on-3, like 5-on-5. Every single time Spurs have attacked, they're continuously bombarding that Man City box with as many men as Man City have back in defence, and just completely cutting out the attacking half of Man City side. And it's so poor, and they need to try and do something about it. But again, it is such great, fantastic link-up play between the Spurs attackers. Maddison on the ball here picks up the ball from Guardiola's loose pass, and of course he passes it to him because he's the man free. Kyle Walker is yonks up the field, way too far up the field, and he can't get back and help out at all, even if he was in his prime and as quick as he was in his prime. And Maddison gets a pass to Son, and Son, what he does with his movement to stop Rico Lewis is brilliant, because when he gets the ball, he takes an extra touch with his right foot, and he looks like he's going to shape it to the far corner. But what that one touch does is it stops Rico Lewis in his tracks, and it makes John Stones shift his body weight to his left hand side, which then means there's a huge gaping hole on his right hand side where Kyle Walker isn't able to fill because he's so far up the field, and where James Maddison ends up. And honestly, if you haven't watched the game or the highlights of the game yet, please go do watch it, because James Maddison's touch, like the first touch was outside of his right foot, and then the second one where he ends up using his weaker left foot to lob goalkeeper Edison, is honestly, it's such an exquisite finishing. It is honestly so good. Go watch it, because it is remarkable. And the fact that Spurs find themselves 2-0 up, and they thoroughly deserve it. Apart from the first 12 minutes where Man City were really on the attack, looking dangerous, Haaland had a couple of chances. He ended up having an XG of just under 1 in the game, so he probably should have scored, but he didn't. Spurs were in it thanks to a couple of good saves from Vicario in goal, who I thought had a really good game. And then Spurs go on, end up pressing, find themselves 2-0 up going into half-time. And then you think to yourself, right, we've seen this before. We've seen Spurs be 2-0 up, and we saw it against Brighton and end up throwing it away. What are they going to do in the second half to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and they do end up going to win the game? And honestly, I have to give credit to Ange Postecoglou, because I do think that, sometimes we can berate a manager in the team and say they're not learning, they're not doing anything different. And sometimes it doesn't have to be sweeping changes. But in that second half, they were more controlled, Spurs. They held the possession a little bit more. They weren't continuously going forward and looking for the attack. When there was a right moment and the opportunity presented itself, they went for it. And they were killer in it in the second half as well. But they were a lot more possession-based, and they defended a little bit deeper, with still the same intensity in terms of pressing, because they knew they could get a Man City, and they knew it was a fundamental of the game, which Postecoglou isn't willing to sacrifice. But they were more sensible. So if they can translate that to the entirety of a season across multiple games, then the Spurs side could go really far. And Spurs were doing a really good job in that second half of keeping Man City at bay, and at times they were getting a couple of half chances, they were growing into the game, but when it mattered, they went up the other side of the pitch and they executed and they killed them with the counter-attack. And this time, you'd think Dejan Kulusevski on the ball has, a very low probability of getting out of that situation. You think to yourself, he's got two players around him, he's probably going to, get tackled and lose possession, and Man City can recycle and go on the attack again. But it was honestly such fantastic play, such good footwork with him in tight spaces. And honestly, the Meg on Gundogan is filthy. So filthy that I was able to pause it and catch it on camera as well. And look at that, Gundogan just absolutely sent to the shops. But he get away, from Gundogan there, and you think to yourself, okay, that's poor defending, but, surely there's a few more Man City players around him. Surely he can't get away from more of them. Well, he does exactly that. This time, Kyle Walker ends up trying to go in for a challenge as well, and he just ends up getting his toe out to it, so he ends up passing the ball to Heung-min Son. And again, really poor challenges from Man City, losing their ground duels, and Spurs just wanting it more, wanting the ball more, wanting to fight more, wanting to win more. And that's something you don't associate with Man City, a side who are notorious for winning, that the opposition wants to win more than them. It was really poor by them, but Spurs and Kulusevski, Maddison, they were excellent on the day. And here you've got Heung-min Son going in for a 50-50 with Akanji and Kyle Walker. Who ends up winning it? Of course, is the Spurs player. Kulusevski ends up winning it, ends up playing a first-time ball to Dominic Solanke, and again, on the counter-attack, if that ball had found Solanke first time, look at the position of the Spurs players. You've got two Spurs players on the counter-attack, closer to the Man City penalty area than their own defenders. But even backing them up, you've got Kulusevski who far left, who's just about in screen, and you've also got Pedro Porro, the one who ends up scoring the goal, in acres of space. Honestly, there is no one around Pedro Porro. It is such poor defending. And this is when we talk about Man City, the age of the Man City players, the physicality, the lack of recovery runs that they make. Do they have that in them? Especially maybe if Rodri was maybe masking for some of the deficiencies. Now that Rodri's not in the side, you're exposing all of the flaws that Man City potentially have. And I think it's showing in the last 5 games now that, they do have some flaws that they do need to address. And this is going to be a big issue because the amount of space Pedro Porro can have, considering he was on the edge of his own penalty area, and the amount of Man City players that he's run past to get to this position here is criminal. And the great thing is, because of how much Spurs want this, it's not just Pedro Porro. Dominic Solanke could also pass to Pape Sarr, who, in my opinion, was so underrated in this game. Running absolutely anywhere. Anytime a Man City midfielder got anywhere near a ball, he was ready to jump and go into that press. And I thought that he was exceptional as well. But this moment is all about Kulusevski first winning the first 2 ground duels, Dominic Solanke keeping his composure even though the ball wasn't quite right, and then Pedro Porro with a lovely finish on the edge of the box with no one around him. And at that point, I thought to myself, even Spurs couldn't bottle a 3-0 lead. And not only did they not bottle it, they ended up making it 4, really rubbing the salt into the wounds of Man City and really, hitting home a few hard truths. Because as Jack Grealish passes the ball to, the invisible man, Timo Werner, who is a very interesting player, he's a good player who doesn't quite have the final product. But what he's really, really good at, and what you do know Timo Werner has, is a lot of pace. And he absolutely rinses Kyle Walker here. But again, it's important to highlight it because the amount of runners that Spurs have into the final third, not only just from deep, which they do have here in the likes of Bergvall in the centre circle, but the amount of Spurs players in the actual attack who are running forward and just want to go on and go score goals. But not only that, they're so willing to get back if they don't end up scoring the goal or the attack doesn't quite working out, to defend their box and defend really, really well. 1, 2, 3, 4 Spurs attackers, 2 other further ones behind them against 1, 2, 3, 4 Man City players and 2 Man City players as well. So literally again matching them man for however many Man City have in defence, Spurs have in attack, and you know what, they just had the confidence that they're going to beat Man City. And this one, Kyle Walker, it's Timo Werner, it's Adama Traore. If you've been watching this channel for a while, I've had my suspicions that it's time for Kyle Walker to, not move on necessarily, but just play less games, less minutes. And yes, it's the end of the game. Yes, Timo Werner is fresh, but in years gone by, you wouldn't have seen this. Timo Werner just absolutely rinses him. And at this point, Man City fans had already had enough. You can see, on the right-hand side, you can see the empty Man City seats. On the left-hand side, you can see the empty Man City seats. And the only place we cannot see a single empty seat is the Spurs end. And they are so glad that they didn't try and get an early home train back to London, because they ended up scoring a 4th goal. Man City 0, Spurs 4. Wow, honestly, this is the thing, because if Spurs can do this on a regular basis, they are such a threat against a side who are defending deep in a low block, and Spurs have to try and break them down. They do have some deficiencies, and they haven't been great at, getting over the line in those games. But when team leaves them space in behind and goes to try and press them, they are absolutely phenomenal. To a man, I've been really impressed with Dejan Kulusevski dropping in deeper into that midfield alongside James Maddison. I thought Ange Postecoglou made the right decision in playing 3 midfielders in terms of Sarr, Basuma and Maddison, and moving Kulusevski further forward, dropping Brennan Johnson, and then bringing him on as a substitute for his pace. And he knows how much he can hurt them with the form he's in at the moment, and he makes it 4-0 as well. 4-0 to Spurs. That honestly, one of their best days in the league, arguably. And all of a sudden, crisis is over for Spurs. They're now 6th in the Premier League. They're only 3 points off the top 4. When you think about it, they scored the most amount of goals in the Premier League this season with 27. 27 goals after 12 games. That's pretty impressive, if we're being honest. And not only that, they've only conceded 13 goals. 13 goals, which is the same amount as Nottingham Forest, who prior to this game week, everyone was talking about Nottingham Forest having impeccable defence, second best in the league. Well, now they're equal with Nottingham Forest. They're only 2 off Newcastle, who, still have a game in hand to play. They're level with Arsenal in terms of goals against. Arsenal, who, been hauled and, being revered for what an incredible defence they have. All of a sudden, everything's looking rosy. But the thing is with Spurs, it's the consistency. Can they keep up this kind of performance week in, week out? Because if they can do that, Spurs do really have a quality side. Their 11 on paper is really, really good. Just get the consistency again and again. But for now, we've got to talk about Man City, because 5 defeats in a row, it's really not looking good for Pep Guardiola, despite the fact that he signed a new contract. And I think the reason why maybe he signed a new contract was the fact that maybe he realised that this season isn't going to be the one for Man City. I still wouldn't rule them out. It does feel different. It does feel like they've lost their edge. It does feel like they're vulnerable. They're human. They're not this incredible machine that was the Man City of previous years. That you do feel like you can get at them. But I still wouldn't rule out them having a good season. I still wouldn't rule out them for the Premier League just yet. I think there is a couple more games coming up. There's a Liverpool game against Liverpool at Anfield, which is going to be a big, big game. But I do think that, something's going to have to change and they need to fix it somehow. Let me know in the comments below what do you think. Spurs fans, enjoy tonight. Enjoy the weekend, because it's well and truly yours.